The name of this talk this morning is Mission Possible. And I wanted to have a little fun with this because as soon as I saw it, it made me think of one of my favorite franchises out there, Mission Impossible. So I've weaved a little bit of it into it, so bear with me. But I want to start off actually this morning with a bit of a story, and this is a story I received I sourced from spiritualpassages.org. It's one of the tools that I use when I'm putting together a talk, and I invite you to also take a look at it as well. It's a wonderful tool, whether you have a talk, even if you have a talk at work. If so, you have to talk about something, you can weave in some of these principles. Don't be afraid to do that. But I want to get started by sharing this short story. It is our faith, our belief that makes us whole, but it is also our beliefs that limit us. In some parts of the world, a young elephant, or young elephants rather, they train them by taking them and tethering them to a giant tree. And they'll use something very strong to tether the young elephant. And the elephant, of course, it being not only an elephant, but also a young elephant, it's going to keep trying to run around and get away. So it's going to keep tugging on it, but it's not going to go anywhere. It's not big enough or strong enough yet in order to overcome that which is holding it in place. And so after about a month or 6 weeks, the little elephant stops trying to get away. So then they switch to something that's a little bit lighter, maybe a rope, and then to something even lighter. I've read that they sometimes use the reeds of a lotus flower. So it's strong, but not that strong, like an elephant can break it. But the elephant's not going to go anywhere because it feels a tug on its leg. It could just tug a little bit harder and break it, but now it's predisposition because of its experiences to not want to actually get away. It believes from the most minute resistance that it can't get away from that circumstance. And so it is with our lives. Life brings to us wisdom, but these experiences can also become a cage for us. In some instances, it limits our movement because of traumatic experiences. They could be financial loss or death of a loved one, some criminal act that was committed upon you. Maybe you had long endured a challenge like a sickness or poverty in your past. And some of us feel like we had to really fight to get to a good place in life. And that good place could be spiritually, it could be in our familial relations, it could be, where we got in our careers, but we still end up feeling stuck. And all of these represent different types of tethers that hold us. But like the elephant, you are now in your fullness, and there really isn't a tether there anymore. So Mission Possible is about cutting that rope, cutting that tether, and putting on your new self, stepping into the person that God has already prepared you to be. Now, you'll notice that throughout this talk, and when I do give a talk, I tend to use the Bible quite a bit, just to make sure I level set for everybody. The reason why I do that is because there's a lot of people, particularly where I live, in Richmond, Virginia, that's their familiarity and that's their entrance into the concept of faith and spirituality is the Bible. So I only use that because it's a source that many people are familiar with. So I like to take that source and, as Ernest Holmes has taught us, to look beyond the words and to look to the spirit backing it. And that's what we're going to do here. So in Ephesians 4:22 through 24, it says, put off, and I'm paraphrasing, but put off the old man and be renewed in the spirit of your mind and put on the new man. So breaking down what that means that you are in one state and you want to move to a different state. You are, let's use poor. And then you want to move to being rich. It's a common one, right? We all think about, winning the lottery or something of that nature. You think about moving from one state to another. Maybe you're single and you're thinking, I want to move to the state of being married. Whatever the case may be, you want to move from one person who you are currently to another person who you wish to be. Now, this is something that many of us have done before, and probably many times in our lives without even thinking about it. We became a different person, not just because we got older, but we consciously made a decision to be someone different. Here's a good one. Many of us have went to college, grad school, maybe some type of specialized training, and we became a thing. Reverend Jackie, for many years, is an engineer. I think she would still call herself an engineer, right? But there was a time that Reverend Jackie was a student. She went into college. She began studying engineering. And let's be frank, at the time that she was studying engineering, it really didn't make it easy for women. So she's studying engineering, this male dominated field, and then she steps out into the work world and she moves from being a student to being an engineer. Now, when you make that move, you may think, well, yeah, you graduated, you got your PE, or you graduated and you passed the bar, or you graduated, you passed the medical exam, and now you're a resident. No, it's not that simple. We all know that when we enter a profession for the first time, or we enter a new undertaking, that sometimes we feel an imposter syndrome. Let me see some hands. Who has ever felt they were impostoring? Yeah, many of us. We feel like, okay, I'm supposed to be in this particular role, but I'm unsure of myself. I'm unsure of who I am. But as you continue, as Reverend Jackie continued working as an engineer, she didn't have to keep telling herself that she was an engineer or keep telling herself that she is qualified to be there. She had to do the work every single day of an engineer, starting off with something pretty small and then working all the way up to managing huge projects and R&D over the course of a career. And at some point, she woke up one morning and didn't think about whether or not she was qualified to be an engineer. It was became a part of her. The same for my wife, who is a teacher. The same for some of you out there who work in the medical field, those who are nurses and doctors and lawyers. At some point, we all woke up and we just were who we were. However, when we consciously want to move in a new direction, sometimes we create barriers for ourselves. When making that change from the old man to the new man is just as simple as you did when you left schooling. I want to use another example here. And inside of the Bible, there's a bunch of stories. Now, from our perspective, this is not a historical book. It is a book that really teaches you about what's inside of yourself. And the same could be said of the Torah, the same could be said of the Bhagavad Gita, and many of those holy books that are out there. Many of those stories represent what's happening inside of human beings. And so in the Bible, I want to take you to the very beginning of the book in Genesis, and there are two characters. There is Cain and there is Abel. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, Cain and Abel are brothers who came from the only man and woman on earth. Like I said, this is not historical. And they had to bring an offering before God. And Cain was a shepherd, and so he brought his offering, which were sheep, I believe, or ram, or something of that nature, but he was a shepherd. And Abel brought his crop because he was a farmer, he grew food. And Abel's crop was accepted, his offering, but Cain's was rejected. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. These are actually parts of who we are, this Cain and this Abel. So Cain is representing the outer world, the world of facts, logic, and limitation, all the things that we are told that we cannot do. While Abel represents our inner offering of imagination and faith to the Creator within. So your able is your great idea. Your able is that which you say that you want to be, the state of consciousness that you want to hold, where you would like to be in life. You want to sit back and you want to look back and say, remember when things were like this. Because you have held on to your able and you have grown into that new consciousness. But all too often, Abel gets killed by Cain. And how often do we allow Cain to kill Abel in our lives? You have a great idea as a teacher, for example, on how to teach a difficult math subject to students. And you move forward with your idea in the classroom and you begin to see changes. You begin to see your students being successful. And fast forward 3 years or 5 years in the future, you get teacher of the year, for your district or maybe for the whole country. That was your able, and you stuck with that through your imagination and faith and brought it into fruition. You stepped into that new level of consciousness. But let's look at that same story again. Now, imagine if you came up with this great idea to teach this difficult math subject to students, and you began talking to some of your colleagues first, those who have been around for a while, those who might be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? They might be a little bit more um, not open. They're not open to those new ideas anymore. They're maybe a little bit jaded in their profession. And maybe those who are really new and they just don't know what's possible. And because of all the limitations that they're sharing with you about your idea, you then allow that Cain to come in and kill Abel. I am simply using these stories as a way for us to understand that in order for us to reach that mission, which is possible, it is necessary for us to take on the right characters within us. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." What this means is that we have to change how we think about ourselves and who we think we are. We have to actually become the word, not the word that's necessarily written in the Bible, but the word that you say that you are, your truth. We must become that thing. Now, Neville Goddard enters a very interesting concept when it comes to gathering those inner forces in order to become that which we want to be, in order to achieve that certain state of consciousness. And he calls it the four mighty ones. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it to you. This is on page 369, and it's a book called the Neville Collection. And it says here, the four mighty ones constitute the selfhood of man, God in man. There are four mighty ones in every man, but these four ones are not four separate beings, separated from one another as are the fingers of the hand. The four mighty ones are four different aspects of his mind and differ from one another in function and character, without being four separate selves inhabiting one man's body. The four mighty ones may be equated to the four Hebrew characters Yod, He, Vo, He, from right to left, which form the four-letter mystery name of the creative power, Yahweh or occasionally Jehovah. From and combining within itself the past, present, and future forms of the verb to be, and this is a big word, the tetragrammaton is revered as the symbol of creative power in man, the I am. The creative four functions in man reaching forth to realize that an actual material phenomenon qualifies latent in itself. Basically, what he's saying is that there are four characters within us at any one time that are working to bring things into reality. And if I can use that story of Mission Impossible for a moment, and if you're not familiar with the franchise, the current one, the show I think started in the 1960s, and they did like a revival of it in the 1990s. So starting in 1996, I think it was Tom Cruise who started playing Ethan Hawke, the main character. But all of these characters, in a way, represent those four beings that were mentioned by Neville. So we have the secretary, and if you remember the show, if you've ever seen the show, it starts off with a tape or some way of communicating a mission to Ethan. And it says, if you choose to accept this mission, do you choose to accept this mission? If you choose to accept it, and then it self-destructs. So that secretary is kind of like the spirit. It's assigning you that mission. You have said, this is what I want to be. And now you are accepting that divine idea. And now the main protagonist of the story, that's you. That's your conscious mind, your will. You are choosing that end result and you are holding on to it. You're an action hero in this case. You are the Ethan Hunt. This is your mission and you're going for it. And then we also have the mind itself. You got to hack those old beliefs. And so we have this character who's responsible for hacking computer systems, and another character who's responsible for figuring out difficult problems. That's your imagination. And then another one who keeps the entire story light. They always have comedic relief, and that's your joy. My point is that you have these characters within you that are working in the unseen realm in order to bring your your vision to life. And let's not forget the other character, the most important character of any story, the villain. And in this case, that villain are the facts, the things that you see around you, because they're always going to show up, but they're never the final word. It is up to us in order to look at that villain and know that it's already defeated. And when I say villain, I'm talking about the things that tell us we can't be, do, and have that which we want in life. There's a story of a Native American man who was denied burial after the Korean War. I actually included it in the chat for everyone as well. It's Sergeant John Raymond Rice. And so he went and fought for the United States of America, of course, understanding the fraught history that the Native American has had within the United States. And he wanted to have a military burial in his hometown, but he was denied having this military burial. His wife fought for him to be buried in this particular cemetery. But they asked, "Is he white?" And she answered the question, "No, he is not." And they denied this hero who was killed in action the ability to be buried in this cemetery. And so this story turned into an uproar nationally, and it eventually got to, I believe, Eisenhower. And Eisenhower approved for him to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. And so the whole story is included in there in the chat that I shared with you. But I wanted you to look at the different characters here in this situation, because he would have never received this honorable burial had it not been that he actually encountered the villain or the outside appearance of fact. She actually had to encounter this in order for this to have a successful outcome. So the wife in this case was kind of like a producer that you would have inside of a movie. And then the public was the director. They all came together. Something in the atmosphere, something in her spirit went out, and everyone got together and supported her in this endeavor. The president himself was kind of like a writer, if you will, if we were writing a story, and he was able to script out the fact that he would be able to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And the actor here in this case was the United States Marine Corps, finally carrying out the work that they've been assigned to do. And that allowed Sergeant Raymond Rice to be buried with honors, even though at the time that was not something we were open to as a country. But the point of the story here is that within this woman, a series of stories began to play out. And within the public, a series of stories began to play out as well, which ended in this person achieving that which they sought to be. So this means that when we are up against outward appearance of facts, it's always important to understand that sometimes we may encounter a door, but that door is never, even if that door is closed to us, another one shall open. So in Romans 8:28, it says all things work together for good. So the villain doesn't necessarily win, but through faith and persistence and identifying with your end result, you in fact will always win. But that part about persistence is so important. All too often we see what we want, but we don't hang on long enough to see it reach its fruition. So, as moving toward putting on that new self, we must constantly use our talents, constantly use the things that demonstrate we are who we say we are. So, for example, in Matthew 25, there's the story of the talents. And in this story, there is a master. He owns a large area of land, and I'm assuming he has crops and livestock and other things that you would have. And he goes away for a little while on a business trip, and he leaves his servants who are in charge of different areas what they call talents, a unit of currency. One was left three, one was left two, and one was left one. The servant who was left three was able to double what his master gave him. And when he returned, he was able to say, "Master, I have doubled that which you've given me." And for the second one, he was able to not double, but he added to it by one. So he had three talents. He was given two, and then he had three talents at the end. And that's what he returned to his master. But the last one only had one talent, and he buried that talent. And when the master returned, he simply returned to him exactly what was given to him, and he was chastised by his master. The purpose of this story is to show that we are given this life, we are given this physical form, we are given certain talents, and it is our duty to use them. It is only by using that which we are given by our Creator that we are able to become that which we what we see ourselves being. It says we must be doers of the word and not hearers only. And when we don't exercise the talents that have been given to us, that begins to wither or atrophy those talents. Let's talk about how we actually move from one state to our desired state. What I want us to do each day is to put ourselves in a position where we can sit and visualize that end result. I want us to visualize in detail what life would be like in your new personhood. So if you're single now and your personhood that you desire is to be married, is to see yourself in that marital bliss. If your personhood in the future is to be like Jackie, an engineer, you see yourself working in your respective engineering profession. Maybe see yourself receiving an award. If you're looking to grow yourself spiritually, maybe you visualize and feel yourself being more calm, being more centered, being more spiritually inclined, moving away from what we call the profane or what we see here in the world. Maybe it's watching less television, whatever it may be in your mind, you see yourself being that person, being that representation of God, listening to your inner life and letting that guide you. And you see and feel yourself already being there. It is something that we must practice on a regular basis, particularly before we go to bed and when we first wake up in the morning. Practice making that a goal. We want to take that goal and make it well formed, positive, specific, possible, and yours. Why do I say possible? Well, we talk about this ability for us to be, do, and have what we want in life. But we have to be mindful. I'm being careful about how I say this. So let me give you a good example here. I am 5'10" and I'm 48 years old. No matter how much I pray, I don't, there is no way that I'm going to wake up and be 6'3" tomorrow, right? That's not going to happen. This is what I'm talking about by possible. Are there surgeries that are available to make me 6'3"? Absolutely there are. But there's no way for that to happen naturally. When I was a kid, I used to read comic books a lot. I am pretty sure if I got struck by lightning, I am not going to have magic lightning powers. I am pretty certain about that. I'll be in the hospital for a while. That I'm certain of too. My point is, that's where I mean by possible. You also want to make sure that it's yours. We don't want to live in an area of fantasy, but at the same time, we also want to open our minds to greater possibilities. What do I mean by also making sure that what you see is yours? Sometimes we have visions and ideas and thoughts that were given to us by another, and we're working to achieve those ideals, and maybe they're not your own. You need to really examine, is what I'm going for in life what I truly want, or did I receive this from someone else? Did your grandmother say something to you 30 years ago and you're holding on to it and you're trying to live up to that? That individual has their life and they have shared with you what they wish for you, but what you wish for yourself is of greater import. How you see yourself is of greater import. And if the desire is not truly yours, obtaining it, you will never develop the burning desire to obtain it. So make sure that it is yours and make it compelling in your mind, meaning that when you get excited when you go through this process of seeing yourself being that which you desire to be. And as things begin to change in your life, notice the pathways, notice the bridges, notice the incidents that are happening in your life and how everything works to your good. Notice how that which you thought was negative at first turns out to be a good thing. And also, always keep your mind on that which you are aiming for. Never dig up your seed too soon. When I was a child, I was about six. I had a project in school, 6 or 7, and we put lima bean in the soil, and we had to put up, I think, a cap of water each day in order to get it to grow. And probably by the third day, I'm being impatient. I'm digging through the soil trying to figure out where the sprouts are. And my mother told me to stop doing that. It's not going to grow. You got to keep it buried. It has to be in the dark. So there is things that are happening in the inner world that we're not going to have control over. So by allowing ourselves to release that, let that go and allow God, then that allows it to grow in the unseen realm. So stop digging up your seed. Stop going back and checking whether or not it's growing or not. It is for us to walk in complete faith that that which we desire to be, how we see ourselves in consciousness, is exactly how we are. How it's going to come about is not necessarily our business. Our job is to focus on the end result and to move toward that. So, as I close today, I would like for you to recognize, or rather, I'd like for you to use a tool, and I like to call it the I am card. You're basically going to take a card and you're going to write I am and then enter that one thing. Now, you can do this with multiple items, but I recommend for starters, you work with one item. That one thing that is deep within you that you've been putting off for so long. It could be a spiritual attainment, it could be a financial attainment, it could be career, it doesn't matter. But that I am is calling to that inner God within you and associating yourself, stepping into that new man to be that new thing. And as you write that I am, I also want you to think about the talents that you have that support what you want to be. So, for example, you're a teacher, let's use a teacher again, and you're really good at math, and maybe you want to develop a new method of teaching, and you know how to do that. That's a talent of yours. Maybe it's speaking in public, that's a talent of yours. Maybe it's helping people to understand deeply who they are and their challenges and provide them with solutions. Whatever that might be, I want you to write down that talent on the other side of that card. And I want you to take one of those talents and practice it in service each week to humanity. And each week you would say, I am. And then you will take a talent and you will practice that talent in service to humanity each week. And think about the different incidences that are happening along the way, the doors that seem closed to you and the doors that are open to you. This allows you to see God's work in action, allow you to remember that and document it. So I'm going to leave us this morning with an affirmation, with a treatment. There is but one mind, one law, one power, and one presence. I am. I and my Creator, Father, Mother, God, are one. I am already new. The old has fallen away. Thank you, Creator. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. And it is done. I release and let go, knowing that it is done. Amen.